May 6, 2013. This is a picture of Dulce Mountain, New Mexico. And everyone's heard the legends there of underground bases, battles between humans. There's stories of two types of aliens or extraterrestrials. One, the Greys, which seem to be pretty monstrous as far as the way they treat humans, and then another race that possibly go back to the Sumerians that are more benevolent as far as the way they look at the human race. They are not out to destroy it, and they do not like what's called the Greys. But in the Sumerian text, you had two half-brothers that were extraterrestrials that came to Earth and supposedly genetically modified Homo sapiens into their slaves and servants. Now, the two brothers ended up on opposite sides as far as the human race went. The one was decided they didn't like the way the human race carried on, and they wanted them to destroy it. The other brother wanted to save the human race. As a matter of fact, they're in the text of Noah, in the flood in the Sumerian text. The benevolent brother actually told Noah how to build the ark. That story's much deeper than that, but just to touch base on that, is the other one wanted to let the flood destroy the human race. When one brother helped the survival of the human race there, millions were wiped out. But because of that and the help of the real God, there were people that survived it. Now, it's a story of 3 times. Again, we go Sumerian, Old Testament, 1979. But there's a couple interesting features in this picture. One at the top, this is your communication tower. You have radio and TV antennas up here. There's a Dulce FM radio station. Another is a place here in the rocks that's an indention there, and you see 2 openings. Now, don't know what that is, but there's a story that makes it stick out in my mind. And I want to tell you the story of that battle in 1979. You've probably seen it. There's a book about it. But I think again, I want to kind of tie this in together. Remember, we're dealing with, in the Old Testament, which needs to be mentioned because of the last video, I think we were dealing with, again, 2 different extraterrestrial advanced races. We were also dealing with the real God, Yahweh, not Yahweh. Now, the Sumerians called him the creator of all. They knew they weren't gods. They were just taking advantage of the situation. But they knew there was one God, the creator of all. But anyway, then in the Old Testament, you have what appears to be one person they call Yahweh. That there's a lot of death and devastation. There's a lot of killing of women and children. Thousands and hundreds of thousands slaughtered. Animal slaughter. Then there's other times when what the prophets are told is not that way. Talks about trying to warn the human race and help. Then you get into the New Testament and written in the Greek, and you see a whole different side of it. We see Jesus, who was sent by Yahweh, the creator of all, to try to straighten out some of these lies and traditions of men. Now, this story goes that the National Secretary Advisor Brzezinski met with President Jimmy Carter in the White House on June 14, 1977. Now, I'm not going to drop any names out there that are not in the book, but Jimmy Carter is the top official involved. It goes down through some of our high-ranking military, some of our experts in flight technology, things like that, explosives. They form what we call the Delta Force. And those names are in the book. I'll put a link to it, and you can go there and look. But it's high ranking, and what we had was a split in the military on this problem. Now, everyone should just study for themselves what's called Project Aquarius. And supposedly, back in 1953, President Eisenhower established this project. It was under the control of the NSC. So we got the NSA, National Security Agency, that's on the side of the humans. The NSC, who is sold out for, again, we talked about this before, nuclear technology and other technology, as long as, and the aliens could have their share of the humans for some terrible reasons. But that was the deal. Anyway, says at that point the NSA opened Department X to identify and study all alien or enemy operations that could be a threat to the U.S. or the human race. Department Z to react and neutralize any sort of threat to the U.S. or the human race. Goes on, they talk about under secret presidential order signed by Jimmy Carter, the NSA's Department Z, the newly established Delta Force, and a specially hand-picked group of Air Force, SOC, Navy SEAL, and Army Rangers were organized for a mission so secret that not even command officers were told what it was until the night of the attack. The only attack team leaders who knew what this would be about were the men involved in the NSA Department Z, who had been involved with the fight for years. The commanding officer of the attack was none other than Captain Mark Richards. Now, I wouldn't throw these out there if it wasn't in the book. It says the son of the infamous Dutchman, Major Ellis Lloyd Richards. And you can look all these names up, and you can get the full history behind. In other words, they're real people. It says he had been the commander of the International Security, or IS, since Admiral Chester W. Nimitz died in 1966. Remember, they named an aircraft after him, the USS Nimitz. It says by 1978, the NSA Department X was warning of the human commanders of new programs starting at Dulce that were so frightening that even seasoned men of war were shocked. It says thousands of young human females were being created in test tubes to be sex slaves for the aliens. But these clones were proving to be less than satisfying for the aliens because they didn't suffer the same way that the once free victims did. They could be engineered to provide better sexual tools for some of the stranger life forms, but they were proving to be nearly mindless and thus couldn't react with the fear that normal young women could. Now, that was because they were probably soulless. Let's go along with the story and see, and just be aware that this is ancient technology also that still exists. We talked about the DNA manipulation in the Sumerian text. So don't just tune out because it's different. Just use discernment, and we'll get through the story, and as time goes on, we'll see how much of it is real. But it says, for that reason, while the clone program would continue, it had been decided that the abduction program would be stepped up, with the force short-term attacks to increase by 1980 to over 100,000 a year, and the facility to be enlarged for long-term victims who would stay there for as long as they live, with numbers over 75,000. That's been reported in about 2 different groups altogether. It says the labs at Dulce started cloning human females by a process perfected in the world's largest and most advanced biogenetic facility in Los Alamos.